In this video, we are going to talk about the mole. So to understand that, we're going to go over some numbers, some definitions, and then also how some conversion problems as well. First off, we need to understand what a mole is. Now, a mole is a measurement. So my examples on the board, you know what those specific words mean. If I say 1 dozen eggs, you know that means 12 eggs. Or if I say a couple dollars, that's $2. Or 1 square people is actually 20. Okay? And so we're going to use one of those words for moles. 1 mole of stuff is always 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd of those items. Okay, so for example, if I had 1 mole of pennies, that equals 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd pennies. Now the reason we use that is because 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd is a large number. Well, we're talking about things that are ridiculously small, like atoms, protons, neutrons, electrons. We can't see these things. However, we can see a mole of these things because there's so many things in a mole. Okay? Now this number comes from a scientist by the name of Avogadro. Now he took 12 grams of carbon and decided he wanted to figure out how many atoms were in that 12 grams of carbon. That involved using the mass of protons, the mass of neutrons, lots of calculations, and he discovered that 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd number of atoms is how many atoms were in that 12 grams of carbon. And so he decided that that was 1 mole. Granted, it's obviously a number that's very much rounded off. I'm sure 1 or 2 of those atoms got lost in the process, but for the most part, we use this number just to keep it simple. Now, another thing we need to understand is when we're talking about 1 mole of a compound, we use the word molecules. And if we talk about 1 mole of an element, then it's atoms. Okay, a compound is a combination of atoms, and an element is just the specific element itself. So for my example, I have NaCl, that's a compound. We would use molecules. Element, sodium, we would use atoms. Now let's say I had 2 moles of iron, and I wanted to solve how many atoms of iron I had. Well, 1 mole equals 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. So if I'm going to use my dimensional analysis, I'm going to basically, you look here, this is not very well written, but imagine there's a multiplication sign here, okay? I'm basically taking my 2 moles and multiplying it by a fraction. Now the reason I'm allowed to do that is because 1 mole equals that amount of atoms. They are the same amount of stuff. Now the difference is what units I use. So this time I have 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd atoms equals 1 mole. So I have my 1 mole below the line of my fraction to cancel out moles. So that gives me 2 times 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd. If I multiply those together, I get 12 times 10 to the 23rd, but then I move the decimal over to the left, and that increases the amount of spaces. So now it's 1.2 times 10 to the 24th. Okay, now that looks really complicated. This is a shortcut of how to solve for this. Take your 2, multiply it by the 6. Just ignore the times 10 part, okay? If you take 2, multiply by 6, that's about 12, and then you would have 12, then you would just write the times 10 to the 23rd part, and it'd be 12 times 10 to the 23rd. We move the decimal over 1 place, then it's 1.2 times 10 to the 24th. These are just some example problems. You can pause your computer to see if you can work on these on your own. And then after you've done that, go ahead and replay this video, and I'll show you what the answer is, which is going to be this. So if you were able to get those answers, these are the correct answers. You might be off by a little bit, but that's okay. But if you have any questions, you need to approach one of your chemistry teachers, okay? And that is all for today.